You don't need to wait for something outside of you to change in order to finally feel that your life is transforming. The truth is simpler and more powerful than it seems. The key to change isn't in time, effort, or what happens around you. It's in the way you observe the now. The world you see is not just a reflection of external events, but of how you interpret, feel, and respond to each moment. It's as if reality were a sensitive mirror, shaped not by what is in front of your eyes, but by the gaze you choose to cast upon it. You can spend years trying to change situations, environments, people. You can move to a new home, change jobs, adopt a new lifestyle. But if your gaze remains locked in the same emotional, mental, and vibrational patterns, nothing truly changes. You keep reliving the same cycles, just with different scenery. This video is an invitation to turn the key. To see that true transformation begins when you change the quality of your observation. When you stop viewing life as a problem to solve and begin to realize that everything, absolutely everything, responds to your state of consciousness. Get ready, because what you're about to discover may deeply transform the way you live, feel, and create your reality. And it all begins with a new way of seeing. The mistake of seeking transformation outside before shifting your gaze. Most people begin their transformation journey believing they first need to change what's outside of them. We think that if we change jobs, cities, relationships, routines, or habits, then something inside us will change too. It's as if we're always waiting for some external turning point so we can finally feel different, lighter, more confident, happier, more connected. But that expectation creates a cycle of frustration and stagnation. How many times have you believed that reaching a certain goal would finally make you feel fulfilled? How many times have you placed your peace in a change of environment, in a new phase in another person? And even after achieving what you desired so much, did you still feel that same emptiness, that repetition, or lingering dissatisfaction? This is the subtle yet profound mistake, trying to transform life without first transforming your perspective. Because no matter how much your circumstances change, if the observer remains the same, trapped in the same judgments, the same limiting beliefs, the same conditioned emotions, they will continue to interpret life through the same filters, and thus will recreate the same type of reality. We change locations but bring the same thoughts with us. We find a new partner, but keep reacting the same way. We renew our habits, yet we're still guided by old fears. The way we see the world continues to dictate the tone of our experience. And that's why, despite all the effort, transformation still feels out of reach. The root of change isn't in what happens. It's in how you observe what happens. It lies in the quality of your presence before life, because your gaze is what gives meaning, weight, and direction to events. And as long as that gaze is bound to an unconscious pattern, nothing outside of you will be capable of creating the transformation your soul longs to experience. The real turning point begins when you realize that life doesn't need to change for you to change. It's the opposite. When you change, everything around you starts to respond differently. That's because you stop being a reactor to circumstances and become a co-creator of reality. You begin to recognize that you have a choice between stimulus and response, between the event and the meaning you assign to it. And it is in that space of choice, subtle, quiet, but infinitely powerful, that true transformation happens. You begin to see that what's out there is merely a reflection of what's being held in here. That you don't need to wait for things to settle, for life to improve, or for others to change. What you need is to change the way you're seeing it all right now. When this realization settles in, the feeling of powerlessness begins to dissolve. You stop resisting what is and start collaborating with life. And in that state of collaboration, reality naturally begins to reorganize itself. People, situations, and opportunities begin to show up on a new frequency, not because the outer world changed, but because you changed the vibration of your observation. The way you observe defines the meaning of everything. The reality you experience isn't built solely on the facts that occur, but primarily on the meaning you give to them. and that meaning is born from the way you observe. The same event can represent liberation for one person and imprisonment for another, simply because each is seeing it from a different internal place. Life doesn't just speak through words, but through symbols, signs, and experiences. And what it reveals to you depends on what you are ready to see. When you shift the place from which you observe, you also shift what you perceive. And as a result, you shift what you feel, how you act, and what you create. The lens through which you view the world is what shapes your emotional, energetic, and even physical reality. Have you ever stopped to think that a simple situation, like a delay, can be interpreted in completely opposite ways? For one person, that delay is a problem, a frustration, an obstacle. For another, it's a divine pause, an invitation to patience, a chance to slow down. What changed wasn't the event, it was the observer. The first person's perspective is rooted in resistance, the second's in acceptance. And from that small yet profound detail, two completely different worlds are lived. The way you observe is the filter that defines whether you see limits or possibilities, loss or renewal, pain or growth. And that filter is built from your beliefs, memories, emotions, and states of consciousness. It's like an invisible pair of glasses you wear all the time, but rarely notice you're wearing. And until you become aware of that, you'll keep mistaking the filter for reality. But when you awaken to the power of observation, you begin to understand that you can choose how to see. You can ask yourself, what meaning am I giving to this right now? Is this way of seeing expanding or contracting my energy? Is it opening me to the new or keeping me trapped in the old? These questions don't change the facts, but they change your internal position toward them, and that changes everything. When you choose to observe with more presence and less judgment, with more curiosity and less control, with more love and less resistance, reality begins to reconfigure itself, because it stops being a battlefield and becomes a mirror of consciousness. And in that mirror, what once looked like a problem can reveal itself as an opportunity. What once hurt now teaches. What once seemed like an end now reveals itself as a beginning. This is where true power starts to manifest, because you're no longer at the mercy of your circumstances. You're conscious of the meaning you give to them. You're using your perception as a tool of creation rather than an unconscious mechanism of survival. You no longer react automatically. You choose, you redefine, you reframe. And in doing so, you transform everything. Because deep down, external reality has no fixed meaning. It is an open field, one that fills with significance according to the vibration of your gaze. The same world can be heaven or hell, healing or chaos, depending on the consciousness that observes it. The observer creates the space for transformation. Have you ever considered that two people can go through the same experience and walk away with completely opposite perceptions? One walks away hurt, resentful, stuck in what happened. The other emerges stronger, more aware, awakened to something they couldn't see before. What determines this isn't the event itself, it's the consciousness that observes it. The true agent of transformation is not what happens, but who observes what happens. Transformation is not something you force, demand, or achieve through effort. It's something that blossoms when there's inner space for it to happen. And that space doesn't open through control or resistance. It opens through presence, through a gaze that welcomes, that listens, that perceives beyond the surface. When you shift your state of being, the field around you begins to shift as well. But it all starts first with the observer. As long as you believe it's events that shape who you are, you'll keep swinging between hope and frustration, because not everything in life can be controlled, and not all situations will meet your expectations. But what can always be transformed is your state in response to what happens. And when that state rises, what once felt fixed or heavy begins, almost mysteriously, to dissolve or reveal itself in a new light. The conscious observer understands that they are not a victim of what they witness. They are an active participant in reality, even in moments when they seem to have no control. Because control was never about what happens, but about how you position yourself internally in relation to it. And that positioning is not superficial, fake, or a mask of optimism. It comes from a deep surrender to the present moment, from the recognition that the true power to change lies in how you choose to see. You may be going through a challenging situation right now. You might feel like nothing is moving, like everything is stagnant, like no answers are coming. But for a moment, try releasing your judgment of it. Let go of the story you've told yourself about what it means. And in that space of silence and neutrality, notice there's something in you that can see it all with greater depth. That something doesn't need the situation to change in order to find peace. It simply changes how it inhabits the situation. That's the beginning of true alchemy. When you change the quality of your observation, you also change the energetic field of your experience. What once felt heavy begins to feel lighter. What once felt like a prison begins to open as a possibility. And not because anything outside of you changed, but because you shifted internally. You stopped reacting and began to create. That inner repositioning is what opens the space for transformation to occur. And it doesn't happen through effort. It happens through resonance. When your perception aligns with a higher vibration of acceptance, of clarity, of love, the universe begins to respond with new possibilities, new insights, new directions. The phrase that guides this stage of awakening is simple, yet profound. Nothing outside of you needs to change for everything to begin to transform. This isn't just a nice idea meant to comfort you, it's a real activation key. Because when you recognize that the power lies in the observer, you reclaim authorship of your reality, not through control, but through awareness. You become the space where life can finally reorganize itself from the inside out. How to identify a limited style of observation? Very often, what blocks transformation isn't the absence of opportunity, lack of effort, or resistance from the outside world. The real barrier lies in the way we're observing life. And most of the time, that perspective is unconscious. We carry lenses that distort reality and believe we're seeing things as they truly are. But in truth, we're simply repeating old patterns of perception that limit the flow of transformation. A limited style of observation sees reality through scarcity, fear, and separation. It's a gaze that judges before it understands, resists before it welcomes, reacts before it perceives. It becomes so accustomed to seeking what's wrong, what's missing, what's threatening, that it becomes blind to what's emerging, available, and ready to blossom. In this state, anything that could be transformative becomes just another reason to reinforce old wounds. It's easy to recognize this type of gaze when we start to notice how we feel as we face life. If there's a constant sense of heaviness, criticism, comparison, or helplessness, it's a sign that we're trapped in a limited way of observing. This perspective is often automatic, reactive, conditioned by past experiences and future expectations. It keeps us from seeing the present with freshness, neutrality, and openness. And without that openness, transformation has no space to occur. Often, this limited style of observation arises as a defense mechanism. When we feel insecure in the face of the unknown, we try to protect our identity with judgment. We create fixed narratives about ourselves, about others, about life. And the more we repeat those narratives, the more they become rigid lenses through which everything is interpreted. The problem is that even when reality changes, we keep seeing the same story because we never took off the old glasses. One of the clearest signs of a limited observer is the tendency to fall into the role of the victim. From this position, everything that happens feels like it's against us. The world seems unfair, people seem indifferent, and life feels like a constant test. This way of seeing closes the field of possibilities and reinforces the sense of separation between the self and the flow of existence. And as long as that separation remains, transformation will continue to feel distant, difficult, unreachable. But there is a way out, and it begins with a simple act of awareness. Recognizing that you're observing from a narrow place, that realization alone begins to dissolve the rigidity of the lens. By bringing presence to the way you observe, you interrupt the automatic cycle of repetition and create space to choose a new internal stance. You don't need to fight the limited gaze. You only need to recognize it, with honesty and without guilt. Ask yourself, am I seeing this with neutrality or with judgment? Am I focused on what's missing or on what's available? Am I reacting like someone powerless or observing like a conscious co-creator of my experience? This shift in perspective is subtle, but powerful. When you stop observing as a victim and begin to observe as a co-creator, everything takes on new meaning. Challenges stop being punishments and become invitations. Difficulties stop being obstacles and reveal themselves as teachers. And the world, which once seemed closed, begins to open in response to a new gaze. The new observer aligns thought, emotion, and intention. There comes a point on the path of consciousness when the awakened observer realizes it's not enough to simply see differently. You must also feel differently and direct that vibration with intention. In this state, observation is no longer just a mental function. It becomes a living field of creation where thought, emotion, and intention intertwine into a single frequency. And it's within this interweaving that real transformative power is born. The new observer is no longer just trying to interpret the world more gently. They become aware that the way they think activates frequencies, that the way they feel amplifies those frequencies, and that the intention they hold directs all that energy into the field of manifestation. In this alignment, the observer is no longer someone who merely reacts to life. They become a source of vibrational emission. They don't just see, they influence, resonate, co-create. This new state of being is not forced. It's cultivated through presence. The mind slows down, the body becomes more receptive, the heart opens. There's a deep listening, not just to what's happening outside, but to what's being generated within. When thought is guided by awareness rather than by conditioning, it begins to harmonize with higher emotions, such as gratitude, serenity, love, and clarity. And in that state, intention becomes a pure channel of direction, not anxious desire, but energetic coherence with who you truly are. True transformation happens in this invisible field. When the observer is aligned, they don't need to control the world. They trust the natural flow of life. Their intention is not an imposition. It's a silent field that magnetizes experiences in harmony with their vibration. And that magnetism doesn't come from effort, but from energetic coherence. Thought, emotion, and intention move together in harmonious flow, and reality responds to that flow with synchronicity. You can feel when you're in this state, there's a softness to perception. Reactions lessen. Spontaneous clarity arises in the face of challenges. Answers appear without being chased. Ideas arrive as intuition, not mental analysis. The body relaxes, the mind becomes a calm mirror, and the heart begins to lead. From this inner place, the observer doesn't try to change the world. They hold a vibration that invites the world to reorganize, and the starting point is always in how they choose to observe the now. Because every moment carries an invisible door, and it's your state of being that determines whether that door opens or remains unseen. A simple yet profound practice can reconnect you to this new way of observing. Breathe. Bring awareness to your body, allow the mind to slow down, and then look at the present situation with neutrality. No labels, no anticipation, no resistance. Just observe with an open heart. And in that space, ask yourself, what is being revealed here? What frequency am I choosing to hold in the face of this? When this practice becomes an inner habit, alignment deepens. Thoughts become more conscious, emotions more refined, intentions more coherent, and life begins to respond with that same quality. Chaos organizes, doubts dissolve, connections intensify, and reality begins to reflect the vibrational field of the new observer. The secret doesn't lie in what you wish for. It lies in the state of being from which you wish. When that state is true, whole, and present, everything around you begins to come into harmony. Because the outer world, no matter how solid it may seem, is only an echo of what is being held within. The universe aligns with the new observer. When the observer changes, it's not just their perception that transforms. The very fabric of reality begins to reorganize around them. This is not a spiritual metaphor or poetic idea. It's a description of how life subtly works at its deepest level. The reality you live is not fixed, static, or unchangeable. It is a constantly adapting field, sensitive to the vibration you emit through your consciousness. And what this field receives as a signal is not merely words or actions, but the internal state of the being who observes. The vibration of the new observer is like a new tone resonating through the universe. And the universe, which responds by frequency, begins to echo that new melody. People who once seemed distant start to draw near. Doors that were once closed open effortlessly. Intuitions arrive as if from a place that always knew. Not because the world has changed, but because the observer is now in harmony with the flow of life. This synchronicity doesn't need to be forced. It unfolds naturally when your inner state is aligned, because the universe is a quantum mirror of consciousness, and it doesn't respond to the appearance of what you think, but to the energetic truth of what you feel and sustain. The new observer understands this. They don't observe only with their eyes, but with their entire field. And this field emits a silent yet clear signal that reverberates through the subtle layers of reality. That's why transformation often begins invisibly. First, you feel something shift inside. More space, more lightness, more clarity. Then you start to notice small changes around you. Unexpected encounters, connected ideas, movements that once felt stuck now flowing. It's not coincidence, it's response. Reality is answering the new observer you've become. And the more you remain in that state of alignment, the more the universe cooperates, not as a servant fulfilling your desires, but as a partner dancing to your rhythm. Life stops being a sequence of obstacles to overcome and becomes an intelligent web of possibilities connected to your state of being. This doesn't mean challenges disappear. It means they now arrive with a clear purpose, and you face them with a different quality of presence. The old observer tried to control what was outside. The new observer understands that true influence lies in what vibrates within. They don't wait for the world to change in order to feel peace. They hold peace, and the world begins to reflect that frequency back. This is the new logic, a non-linear logic, not based on traditional cause and effect, but on energetic resonance. And the more you live from this awareness, the more evident it becomes. You begin to trust more, not because everything always goes perfectly, but because you realize even detours are part of the harmony. Life becomes a living language where every symbol, every silence, and every synchronicity carries a message. And that message is always shaped by the observer you are being. The phrase that captures this truth is simple, yet profound. Transformation begins invisibly, but the universe responds visibly. First you change on the inside, then everything around you starts to reflect this new field. And when that happens, you no longer need to prove anything or convince anyone. Reality itself speaks. It shows with clarity that the universe is always listening and responding to the observer you choose to be. We've reached the end of our journey, but true transformation begins now. In the moment you decide to look at life with new eyes. Everything you're seeking is already present, just waiting for a new observer to be revealed. You don't need to control time, nor change the world. You only need to consciously choose the inner place from which you observe. Remember, you are not waiting for transformation. Transformation is waiting for your new gaze. And it's that gaze, in aligned with presence, gratitude, and intention, that begins the dance with the universe. Now, an invitation. For the next 24 hours, observe everything as if it is being transformed in this very moment. Even the most ordinary things may contain a portal to the extraordinary, if you're willing to see, because in the end, you don't change the world. You change the way the world moves through you. And that changes everything.